I'm Tim Ventura from AmericanAntigravity.com, and I'm speaking with John Thomas, the CEO of Disk Corporation, working with the technology of John Searle. The first thing I'd like to ask is, the Searle effect has been around for years and years, and I'd be interested in finding out a little bit about how things have been going lately.
Well, as you say, the Searle effect has been around for years and years. It hasn't been redeveloped or made into a working unit since 1980s. Since that time, as you probably know, all of his work was destroyed and taken from him. But now, since 1995, John Searle and I formed a corporation in New York State to try to further this work by attracting funders and backers, people who want to see this work. We've had a number of offers at different times, and people who have come and gone, but no one has actually come up with funds directly to Professor Searle. That's what's needed. There was a man who invested some money in England, and matter of fact, I was going to join that group as well. It's called SISRC, and it turns out that their motives were not as what I thought they should be, and Professor Searle and myself have disassociated ourselves with them, and there was quite a bit of animosity between the two groups, or between John and that group, and that had been explained in our webpage previously.
Oh.
But we are progressing now. We've built a new magnetizing unit, which is the heart of the entire process. That is, it's built and the specifications are intact and known. So we are ready to begin to print the magnetic pattern necessary to build an SEG.
Okay. Well, the Searle effect, from what I've read, came to John Searle in two dreams, which he later wrote down and took notes on, and turned those notes into an effective unit. And the Searle effect, or the SEG, the Searle effect generator, provides, well, I guess on the one hand, it provides electrical power. That's the first aspect of it. And then on the other part of it, when it's connected to a large enough load, it will actually take off. Is that correct?
That's the unusual thing about it. When John Searle was a young boy, first had the idea for the SEG, he got that idea from a combination of things, that being the dreams that he received over the course of 7 years, and his job and where he happened to be working. And so he was fascinated with things like the ball race and how you could charge that with an air supply and get it spinning, and the various gyroscopic phenomena that would occur. He observed this and learned from it. He also worked in a place that made generators and made magnetics. So he was very fortunate to have not only worked there, but to have a boss that would allow him to use the equipment and consult with their engineers.
Yeah,
and he did so and built a number of units. The first one he built is where he discovered that he couldn't only stay on the ground. The first one he built, he started and did it on a kitchen table at his landlady's house, and loaded it up with he had it all built with the coils on the outside and ready to work as an electric generator. And he hooked up light bulbs and various things, radio, and then he hooked up a cooker. He built a cooker in England, which is a 240 volts that draws a heavy load. And it took off. It got very cold, as he found out later, and it rose up and hit the ceiling with carrying all this paraphernalia behind it. So it was quite a shock to him the first time this ever happened.
Yeah, that's one of the things that makes the SEG unique, at least from Searle's description. Apparently, the larger the load that you connect to it, the more power it produces, the faster it runs.
Absolutely. What happens is, as the power load increases, the device tries to meet that load. And so it will put out higher and higher voltage until it can meet the load. And if the load is too great, what happens is you have the electrons that travel out from the last rollers, from the third line of rollers on the SEG, travel out so many electrons that it actually creates a vacuum. And so you get the cold, a combination of cold from the electrons and also a vacuum formed around this. And the cold goes down to, John Searle has told me that it goes down to 4 Kelvin, which is almost absolute zero, and well into the superconductive range. So we surmise that the entire unit becomes superconductive at that point, and then puts out a tremendously, even a higher amount of electrons. And that effect, in conjunction with the gyroscopic and vortexial effects of the unit itself, creates a gravity field.
Oh.
That field causes it to rise up.
Well, to go back and touch on the magnetizer for a sec, because you mentioned having one of those. One of the things that I've seen a lot in the news groups is people attempting to build small-scale SEGs on their own. And I think I've seen 4 or 5 fairly serious replications at this point. But what tends to inevitably happen is because these individuals usually don't really read up on the subject, or perhaps they just don't have the equipment to produce the magnetizer, they're actually not creating the actual SEG. They're just placing magnets together.
Well, unfortunately, that's true. I have never, in all phone conversations or on the web page or anywhere else, I've never encouraged people to go out and build their own SEG. I don't discourage them from trying or experimenting. That's fine. It's up to them. But I don't encourage them because it looks simple. It looks like 3 rings, 66 rollers, and it looks like it's an easy thing to build. In comparison to, say, a gasoline engine, a lot of parts.
Definitely.
But they get the idea that all they have to do is take magnets and put them together and put them on a ring that's magnetized, and it will function. And it won't. One fellow was very irate with me. He wrote me an email and said, I bought these rollers, and I bought this ring, and I had it made, and I had it magnetized, and I put it on there, and it didn't work.
Yeah, I've always felt bad to see posts, because what happens is, to begin with, people invest the money in it, and then they walk away not really having anything that's workable, and then, and it results in, on the internet and in the news groups, it results in a little bit of bad publicity for Searl, because you have people coming forward and saying, well, I built this and it didn't work. But
well, they don't understand, and they don't acknowledge is that we never gave them directions. There's never been a set of blueprints or directions on how to build an SEG issued ever. The technology has been presented in such a way that you can see how this is possible, how it's plausible, how it can be a functioning unit to the laws of physics and to how it's built. But we don't give out directions because we want to build it ourselves.
Oh, definitely. Well,
and we're looking for, and it doesn't have to be. I mean, obviously, we're looking for the investor for the $400 million price tag, and so we can just go ahead and do it and get it done. But that isn't the only way. I've had some people that have helped us out. One person donated a computer. Another person did another computer to Professor Searle, and they have come by and tried to help any way they can, knowing that they can't build it themselves. And so when we get bad publicity because people tried and failed, it really isn't quite fair to Professor Searle or his technology, for that matter.
Well, one of the things that I guess my strange story with the SearlFX was, as I've mentioned in the past to you, I had actually read up on the SearlFX in the early 90s, and at the time, just not knowing a whole lot about it, I tended to look at the credibility issues that had surrounded Searle, and at that time, I really felt like it wasn't a workable idea. And the strange thing that had happened, actually just last year, was when I started doing my correlation study of different anti-gravity methods and, designs on the internet, I started looking at claims from a variety of different sources. And the strange thing, it just kind of amazed me. It brought me complete circle back to the SearlFX. Was, a lot of not only the major effects, but the side effects, the stuff that people aren't really looking for, but they just kind of notice it when it happens, are actually similar to the SearlFX. And it's almost like these things surround it in a circle, where you have different side effects from one device to the other or the other. But these are all things that Searl has actually been talking about for years.
That's right. And we're getting more and more people that are looking at various devices and other people's inventions and trying to search out a workable generator or even a flying craft. And we're getting them to go full circle. They finally come back to us and say, well, why don't we go over this again? Because it sounds like you're on the right track. And we didn't realize it before, so we looked at all this one and this one and this one, and we found out that actually they all correlate to a point that yours seems to be the best.
Yeah, it was just the most surprising thing, because I guess by using the internet now, we can look at information that no one's ever had complete access to in the past.
Oh, right.
Just because it was scattered around. And
you seen the Russian and Gooden?
Yeah, Godin and Roshan was a perfect example, where they actually had a variation on the SearlFX generator, and they were still able to get some results. And it seems like also a fair number of experiments are deviations from the SearlFX generator specs, I guess, but they still tend to produce results. One of the things, though, that's kind of a worry is no one's really run any of these long enough to know, if they have problems with heating or, magnetization problems or anything like that.
Well, I agree. They may have to run them and test their units. And unless they build it like Professor Searle has explained that it has to be built, they're going to end up with friction problems or heat problems and overloading, magnetic breakdown, a lot of things. And where you don't with an SEG. The SEG puts out electrons, actually puts them into the copper wire that you're using. It doesn't just move the electrons that are in it. And by doing that, it's much, much more efficient, and there is no heat.
Yeah.
Because the heat is developed in a conductor because of current drawn. And the current drawn is because of the strain of electrons going through the lattice matrix of the conductor.
Well, I've been digging pretty deep into a lot of the newer physics theories and, a lot of the research into gravity. And that, and again, looking at the other claims that are out there. And one of the interesting things is, again, reports that wouldn't make sense or, weren't believable, 20 years ago, like the SEG running cold. A lot of the really recent stuff tends to support that idea that maybe this device is moving energy, from here to there, and as a result, it's cooling it. It seems to be a common claim among people who have had magnetic systems that lift it off.
Right. Well, it makes sense. I think that when there is a success, and there may be several successes, that they will all have a common tie, because physics is physics. And if you have the success with vortexing fields, say like Schrödinger for going way back, and some of the others I've looked at, then you correlate it to Professor Searle's work, you have rotating vortexes.
Yeah. Well,
it all has to tie together if it works.
One of the things that I found that was actually very interesting was I came across a report by Paul Brown, and Brown had built an SEG in the 1980s. I think 1982, 84 was the era where he tested it. And, among other things, he actually had a letter that he'd written to a colleague talking about testing the device. And apparently Brown's wasn't quite to spec, but he did talk to Searle, I guess, a fair amount through letters. And the results that he published, he'd said that it actually melted the neodymium rings because it produced so much electricity, which was kind of an interesting result. So, despite the fact that the test itself was somewhat of a failure, he felt like, in the letter, I think he mentioned, hundreds of kilowatts, maybe, of power.
Yeah, I haven't seen that letter, so I don't know. I can't comment on it.
Yeah, I was very surprised too. And that the thing that was really amazing was it was completely independent. It didn't involve the Searl organization, so it provides that independent backing for the plan.
I talked to Paul Brown a few times, and I was trying to see if the magnetizing had to be built still available. And unfortunately, Paul's no longer with us.
Yeah, it was definitely a loss, and
I was even interested in his company that he had started. But I kept conversation with him, and he was, although he elected not to continue working on the project himself, he didn't have anything bad to say about it. He thought it was worthy of looking into.
Yeah. Well, one of the things that makes Searl interesting, and I guess switching gears just a little bit, is from a cultural perspective, whether or not the skeptics out there believe Searl's claims or buy into this or that or the other theory, one of the things that pretty much everybody has to acknowledge is that in terms of kind of modern anti-gravity, in the classical sense, Searl is really the father of that.
Well, that's true, and I think he's been underrated and not given any credit for so long that it reminds me a little bit, pardon the comparison, but it reminds me a little bit of Tesla, how he was just kind of shunned and not given much credit for anything, even though he was brilliant. And Professor Searl has got he needs to be able to be put in a lab and direct people and just to do what he tells them to do. And that's not just for SEG or even just for the IGV. There's so many more things that are involved in this law of the squares that can be pursued. And that we need him to do it. And it would be a terrible, terrible loss if he did not complete his work before he died. Well, because I don't think anyone else can.
Yeah, he definitely has a unique perspective, and he's been out there on his own for so long that he knows things just from experience that other people don't about these types of effects. One of the things that I've considered building is an N machine to test some of the ideas behind rotating magnetic fields. And, if the winds of funding go my way, which I doubt they will, but, someday I would like to build an SEG. It'll be an interesting project, and it would be, it would be fun to build.
Well, if you get the funding, then you know where to find out how to do it, don't you?
Yeah. Well, there's an elegance to the design. The rings and the rollers, there's kind of a symmetry to it that a lot of other designs don't have.
There is. There's, the ring supports, it's got enough space for exactly 12 rollers on the first ring. And when the rollers start to move, there's so many things that start to happen. The movement is magnetic. The movement is a misalignment or a way of setting up the poles on the ring and the segments of the roller. There's 8 segments to a roller. So they interact and start your motion. Once the motion is started, many things happen. That's not the end of it by any means. A lot of things go on. There's the interaction of electrons travel from the neodymium out through the conductor. There's eddy currents. There's voltage produced. There's magnetics produced. You have magnets in motion in relation to conductors, which causes electrical generation. You have conductors in motion in relation to magnetics, same way. So there's a lot of things that happen, and also when it's running properly, the rollers don't touch the ring.
Yeah.
They ride a couple of thousandths off.
Well, one of the things that I've been trying to work on, and again, looking at the larger scale of devices, but the SearlFX is kind of the prototypical device in this class, is, again, various people have tried different approaches to it, and, some of them are just outlandish, but others are fairly reasonable, and yet it seems like about 98% of the time when people try things, they don't work, and then there's that 2% where people see something, they have difficulty replicating it.
Let me let me tell you something. I just read a report by Gunnar Sandberg, one of the original reports that introduces his other papers or references his other papers. And in that, he said that when they made the magnets, he said the success rate for them making the magnets was about 25 to 28% success.
Oh, okay.
Whereas 75% of the magnets that they made did not work. And that had to do with the type of the device they had and the method they had of switching power. So they could get them to work, but so even he had a 75% failure rate in making his own magnets, and he knew how.
Yeah, yeah.
So, for someone else to go in there and try and then, magnetize something, try it, say it doesn't work, and write it off is kind of ridiculous.
Well, one of the things that I've been trying to look at, though, is, and again, not the SEG in particular, but with this class, one of the things I've been trying to kind of brainstorm is, why do some of these devices work and the others not? And I guess one of the ideas that came up when I was looking at the N machine and homopolar generators was it's possible, I guess, in an alternative explanation, that the SEG is actually a dynamic magnetic energy storage device where the field that it creates sustains the field. So, as it spins, it's actually, not using energy, but still warping space-time.
Absolutely. And the magnetics are reinforced when the unit starts to run, even if there's no load. The magnetics are reinforced throughout the device. One reinforces the other, one field. It's like putting a keeper on a magnet, only better. And so the magnetic fields do not degenerate at all. Now, as far as the warping of space-time, I haven't got into that as far as I would like. We are looking at applications more on the space end of it rather than the SEG end. The SEG we envision anywhere from running an automobile to your home to actually replacing big power plants. There's a lot of atomic power plants that have to shut down if their life expectancy is over and they're forced to shut the doors. They need something to replace that. Either another nuclear plant, which is dirty and causes a lot of nuclear waste, or something better. And we plan on offering them something better.
Well, do you think, as a corporation, then the power applications are probably the first step, and then the anti-gravity or levitation applications would be second?
Absolutely. Even though I think anyone who's involved in this work just would love to jump right into the anti-gravity section, we can't. As a business and as getting started, we have to concentrate on generation of electricity, and this is what we're going to do. So the first units will be small enough to, a home or a car, and we will work up to larger units that may be able to power a luxury liner or a power plant.
Sure.
Anything that runs on electricity.
Well, yeah, in a way it's probably almost daunting because Searl had such success initially, and and again, the skeptics out there would say, well, he didn't do this or didn't do that, but we have photos that he at least built the devices, the IGBs, which I've always wondered about. Why would he build them if they didn't work? But
well, he never advertised the SEG. At the time, he did take an SEG to Canada once and talked to the Minister of Energy and tried to get him to back his work. And it was funny because the Minister of Energy, but first he went to see him. And when he finally got an audience with him, he had a small device running on his desk. And he didn't want to look at it. And then when he finally looked at it, he said, well, you know what you've got there? He said, you've got perpetual motion. And John said, well, I'm glad you said that, not me, because you'd have thrown me out.
Oh. Well, one of the things that was kind of interesting was, I believe it was either yourself or perhaps Russell Anderson in the news groups, because he's a big SEG advocate. He's actually working on one of his own at the moment. But I've been told about an SEG that had been shipped to Edwards Air Force Base, and apparently the story is, I guess, that the military tested it and they just couldn't make heads or tails of it and sent it back. But the surprising...
That's true. There was over 13 different people directed to look at this. And it wasn't just an SEG, it was an IGV.
Oh, yeah, I'm sorry.
And it was the craft was sent over there and shipped over. And they were testing it. And from what I understand, from what I get from Professor Searle, is that they ran it through its course, and they started it, and they made 90-degree turns and 180-degree turns and things that would have caused tremendous G-force inside. And they, as you said, they did not know how it worked. And the explanation they gave to John Searle when they returned it to him was, well, anybody inside the ship would be dead. They couldn't possibly withstand that kind of G-force. And they really don't understand the theory of operation. We're not interested.
You know, one of the things, actually, kind of two thoughts about that. The first was, I've actually talked to two people, and conveniently enough, I forgot their names. I'm trying to work on remembering where I was and what I was doing when I talked to them. But I was following up on leads for another story, and somebody had told me that they saw a quote-unquote UFO at Edwards in a hangar with the doors open. And this would have been, I believe, the 70s.
Oh, yeah, that could have been it.
Yeah, and so that was kind of surprising because it made me really think twice and say, well, you know, it would seem odd that he would ship one over there, but, you know, here's somebody else, and they, you know, it would be an honest mistake. It looks like UFO.
And, you know, it wasn't just Professor Searle's idea to send this over, and it wasn't their idea to ask for it. This was a direct result of communication that John Searle had with John F. Kennedy. Not many people know that.
You know, one of the things that might be interesting, kind of as my second thought, when you mentioned that the military having difficulties, you know, now one of the big pushes with the Air Force and a lot of other branches is the unmanned vehicles. And, you know, if their criticism rested mostly on the basis of they were worried that it would crush pilots, well, you know, they might perhaps be willing to reconsider, you know, if Searle was to take, like, the old paperwork back and say, look, you know, this project didn't work because of this reason, but, you know, please reconsider as an unmanned vehicle. Do you think that...
Well, yeah, absolutely. And the vehicle, obviously, that they tested was unmanned. And I believe that, I guess I don't know exactly why they turned it down. I have a suspicion that they were directed to look at it. This rubbed them the wrong way. They have top engineers in the world looking at it and can't understand it. That got them mad. Many engineers I talk to get very upset when I talk to them about an IGV and they say it's impossible. And then once they really study and look at it and understand the facts of how it works, then they have a realization. But prior to that, they're angry because you are threatening their knowledge base, and you're also presenting them with something they do not understand. So I think all this combination of things cause them to send it back. Today, if they could demonstrate a craft today to the U.S. Air Force and offer it to them, do you think they'd ever turn it back to us?
Yeah,
I don't.
Yeah. Well, you know, and then actually, I wanted to ask you a question kind of for the inventors out there, but one of the things that I was hoping to find out a little bit more about was, you know, a lot of the materials, I understand that Searle was able to get neodymium because of his job, but in today's market, small amounts of neodymium are easy to buy, you know, just as magnets, but, you know, the larger quantities that the SEG requires, you know, is there a good source for this, or should people consider trying to scale down their SEG as an alternative?
Well, they could try to scale it down. As I say, I don't like to see a lot of people spend a lot of time and money in trying to build an SEG if they're not going to have a full success. They may have a partial success, and if they're happy with that, that's great. And if they want to build it themselves, they don't want to, you know, back us or see that try to further the work that way, then that's fine. There's different places you can look up elements on the internet and find neodymium. You can get it in pretty good quantity. I have a source that gets it directly from a manufacturer, and I can get it in larger quantities. But it's still very expensive. The last piece I bought for just ring one was over $1,000.
Oh, okay. Well,
So it's not cheap for anybody. It used to be John said it used to be 35 cents a kilogram, 1,000 grams when he was building them. So because they didn't use it for anything but coloring glass.
Yeah.
They didn't know it was a good magnet, a good material for magnets.
Well, in terms of public support, it seems like things tend, in general, things tend to swing back and forth, I guess, over the years. But one of the things that surprised me was in the news groups, Russell Anderson, again, is building a project, and he's working with a few other people in the news group. And they're actually, they're not getting rich, but they've been able to collect some contributions, and they're trying to do an independent replication that way. So it seems like people are definitely interested in this project moving forward. And, I can't think of a better company to invest in than DISC if you're going to invest in an SEG. So.
Yeah, and I guess I mentioned it, but no one since 1989, no one has ever invested in John Searle. No one. There's been a backer that has said, "Here, John, here's the money. Make me an SEG." The closest thing I came to was the group in England, and they turned out to be untrustworthy.
Yeah. It's been a difficult road, but it seems like we're experiencing an enormous groundswell of support for these ideas, and and again, Searle there's a history there. There's this legacy, and even with even for skeptics who don't buy into the Searle claims, there's still the history of he was doing it first, and he really kind of defined a lot of the modern roles that when we think of anti-gravity, we're in some ways we're thinking of Searle.
Yeah, and I have noticed an upsurge in interest. I have been approached by so far 3 people that I know that are legitimate and are really endeavoring to get their organization or their people who do the funding interested enough to back this work. And hopefully we will have one of them that will come forward in time.
Okay. Well, with that, I think I'd like to close up for the day. But
sure.
I should say thanks. I sincerely appreciate your time, and it's been, as always, a learning experience for me. And do you have anything you'd like to say in close?
No, just that if people are trying to work on the units and build them themselves, I wish them good luck. We'll give them all the information that we can, and they can see a lot of it on our webpage at SearlFX.com.
Well, thanks again, John.
Thank you.